Putin is continuing to advance into Korea.
When did we beat Japan at anything?
To disperse with 30 bullets within half a second. 30 magazine clip in half a second.
Right now, if you Google the word idiot, a picture of Donald Trump comes up. I just did that.
We'll do it live!
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Political Circus Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Mike Ursery, and you are listening to episode number 32. So this past week was a monumental week in terms of world history. On June 6th, which was this past Thursday, June 6th was the 75th anniversary of something that we call D-Day. Now, D-Day, of course, was the day of an Allied assault on the beaches of Normandy in France in 1944. It is the largest amphibious assault in military history, and it was the beginning of the end of the reign of the Third Reich across Europe. Yes, the beginning of the end of Nazi Germany as the world knew it back then. At 6:30 a.m. local time, 165,000 service members from the United States, Great Britain, and Canada stormed the beaches at Normandy, fought through the line of German defense, and went on to first liberate France, and then made their advance towards Germany. It ended with the Allies in 1945 marching through the streets of Berlin. Adolf Hitler, as you probably know, if you are a student of history, as you probably know, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in a bunker, and Germany surrendered. And that was the end of action in the European theater in World War II. Of course, the Pacific theater was still hot at that time. Japan surrendered in August of 1945, but Germany was the first to surrender. You know, being someone who enjoys history, one thing that I sometimes do, I play the what if game with history. And in this case, what if? Now, the Allies obviously were able to penetrate German defenses at Normandy. But let's just think for a minute. What if Germany had been able to repel that assault? How different would things have been from that moment going forward if the Allies failed in their effort to breach the coast of Europe? How would that have impacted the rest of World War II? And how would that have impacted the way that World War II would have ended if the Allies were not successful in that? And when you think about that, that's a scary thought. That is a scary thought to think about. But luckily, thankfully, we don't have to think about that. Instead, we think about what actually happened. The Allies were successful. The Allies were later victorious. And now, every year on June 6th, we remember what we call, I say we, I mean as in the United States, probably across the entire world. We call it D-Day. Now, you know that the actual name for that one particular mission was not actually called D-Day. In fact, that day was one of several D-Days during World War II. The actual name of that particular assault on the beaches in Normandy, France, was called Operation Overlord. Now, D-Day was the name that they gave to it, what they used to describe it. And there are a lot of different theories for why missions such as that one were called D-Day. And I did a little bit of reading on that this week because I wanted to talk about this particular thing on the podcast since we are talking about June 6, 1944. And what I was able to find is that there are different theories for why it was called D-Day. And one of them I read up. Now, from a military strategy standpoint, operations such as Operation Overlord and every other D-Day that took place during World War II, before they decided on what day they were going to do each individual amphibious assault, they simply called it D-Day. And this was a way that commanders, when they were giving instructions to their troops and telling them about what they were going to do, they simply called it D-Day. And one theory is that D-Day meant Day of Decision or Decision Day. And then when they decided on what day to actually launch the assault, they would start saying the date. Another theory that I saw was that it stood for Disembarkation Day because they were deploying troops during these amphibious assaults, and so they would call it disembarkation. And on that same token, I've also saw that people had theories that it was called de-embarkation. Now, one of the sources that I had looked at was time.com, and I found something interesting in this one particular article. And one thing that they say, this one part of the article, it reads, the French maintain the D means disembarkation. Still others say debarkation. And the more poetic insist D-Day is short for Day of Decision. When someone wrote to General Eisenhower in 1964 asking for an explanation, his executive assistant, Brigadier General Robert Schultz, answered, General Eisenhower asked me to respond to your letter. Be advised that any amphibious operation has a departed date. Therefore, the shortened term D-Day is used. So, according to the highest ranking general, American general, during World War II, D-Day is used because they were referring to a departed date. It's pretty cool what you can learn when you do some digging. And there you have it. A brief history of Operation Overlord, or as we refer to it as D-Day, even though it was only one of several D-Days. Operation Overlord, the assault on Normandy Beach. There was also a D-Day marking an assault on Guadalcanal by the Marines. Actually, that was actually the first amphibious assault in the Pacific by the Marine Corps. They also did amphibious assaults or D-Day on places such as Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Tarawa, Peleliu, several others. That was all during the Marine Corps' island hopping campaign in the Pacific. This week on June 6th, leaders from countries who were involved in the Second World War, an annual thing that they do to ensure that the atrocities from the Second World War are not repeated, they hold a commemoration every year on June 6th. And looking at the pictures, because it's not just world leaders, there are also World War II veterans who attend this. And seeing these men and women who attend this, who were involved in Operation Overlord in some capacity, when they return and they visit, it is so moving to watch them. Just you watch their facial expressions, you watch them tear up, you watch them share their stories. And let me say something really quick. If you come across a World War II veteran, talk to them. Talk to them. Ask if they will share their stories from World War II. Don't ask them about anything specific. Just ask them to share their stories, and they will tell you their stories. I have talked with World War II veterans, and I have asked for stories. Veterans from the Second World War are in their late 90s. Some of them have reached 100. Let them tell their stories, because one of these days, the stories are all that we are going to have. We will not have any more World War II veterans. So if you ever come across a veteran of the Second World War, talk to them. Let them share their stories. They will share their experiences. They won't tell you everything, obviously. There are some things that they'd rather not talk about, and understandably so. But they will still... Those stories are so valuable. Another thing that happened this week, the British royal family invited President Donald Trump and members of the first family to Buckingham Palace for a state visit. And the only thing I'm going to say about that this week, of course, there was a lot. There were protests taking place. There were the giant baby Trump balloons. What's really funny is that in the UK, they have a knife ban, yet some pro-Trump person used a sharp object to pop the giant baby Trump balloon. And I think that is hilarious. It's great to see just how well that knife ban is working for the UK. But, up until this week, I did not know that the royal family had a Twitter account, nor did I really care. So that's why I didn't know. But still, the only reason why I know this is because, this tweet, I did a search for this tweet on Friday and I could not see it. Thankfully, people took screenshots and I was able to see it that way. But there is one tweet that had people laughing. This one tweet from the royal family Twitter account, @royalfamily. This is on June 5th. The Queen was introduced to leaders by the Prime Minister at 10 Downing Street, each representing the allied nations that took part in D-Day, #DDay75. And in the picture, you see a picture of Queen Elizabeth about to shake hands with Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany. Germany was not one of the allied nations that took part in D-Day on June 6, 1944. No, they were one of the Axis powers that took part in D-Day on June 6, 1944. Of course, Germany, is an ally now, but still, that's just kind of funny. I'm sure plenty of people let whoever runs that Twitter account know that they made a mistake, which is most likely why that tweet was deleted. Of course, screenshots are forever, but still, that is wow. So this 75th anniversary of Operation Overlord, which was just one part in a combined effort by allied nations in a fight against fascism and tyranny. On this 75th anniversary, we were hit with a heavy dose of irony. Because if you have been paying attention to the news this week, then you would have heard plenty about what is now being called the Vox adpocalypse. And if you don't know what that is, so YouTube is once again cracking down on content on their platform. And what they are doing is they are demonetizing certain channels. They are deleting certain videos. that they say violate their community standards. But this is not YouTube acting on their own doing this. What this actually is an activist who works at Vox Media, an activist who calls himself a journalist, but as I've said on this show before, that activism is not journalism. Therefore, he's not a journalist, he's an activist. Carlos Maza. Carlos Maza was making a big fuss this week about conservative comedian Steven Crowder, because Crowder was saying some things about Carlos Maza. So Carlos Maza is Hispanic and he's also gay. Crowder was saying some things about Maza. I don't remember exactly how this got started, and that really isn't relevant to me anyway. But Crowder was saying some things about Maza. He was calling him certain names. He called him a lispy queer. He called him some other things. He said some things in a voice to mock the way that Maza talks. And of course, Maza also has a problem with one of Crowder's t-shirts that he sells. And it is a t-shirt that has a picture of Che Guevara on it. And it says, "Socialism is for figs." And the I is actually a fig leaf. Now, it doesn't take a genius to know that that's actually a play on words. He's not actually saying socialism is for figs. He's saying socialism is for fags. He's just doing it in a really clever way. And that's why Maza takes offense to it. As far as the saying itself, Maza is a self-proclaimed Marxist, so draw your own conclusion there. Maza has been on this campaign to get Steven Crowder completely banned from YouTube, like taken down completely. That hasn't happened. His channel has been demonetized, but his content is still on the platform. Now, I wouldn't call myself a big fan of Steven Crowder. I don't really watch his channel. I've watched a couple of his videos this week, but I know enough about Crowder to know that this is a guy who says whatever he wants, and he does not care. Does not care what people say. He does not care what people think. He is going to say whatever he wants. In fact, he actually issued this, quote, apology. And this was really, this is just Crowder being Crowder. But he issued this one apology, and he was really just making fun of Maza here. And it was a 20-minute video of him apologizing for everything that he ever said. And in this 20-minute video, he goes through to actually say everything that he's ever said. I'm not going to play the entire 20-minute video for you, but here's a small clip of that video.
Finally, I would like to apologize for the use of all of the following racially, sexually, and generally prejudicially charged pejorative nouns and or adjectives that have been used on this program. Homo, colored, queer, rear admiral, buzz-cutted lesbian chain gang, starfish, and Mexican. I think that about covers it. Again, I would like to issue my sincerest apologies, and if I've forgotten anybody, please list your grievances in the comments below. I'll be sure to get back to you with great haste.
I really want to know what that rear admiral part was. Just like all these, of course, this. Now, the actual clip wasn't censored, but I didn't want to put a bunch of words or, put a bunch of stuff into my episode that he said. So I found a censored version of this clip. But, I should go back and find that I should probably go back later and watch that, because I want to know what that rear admiral part in the very middle of all those beeps was supposed to be. And then I like how he just kind of nonchalantly ends it with, and Mexican. So, of course, that apology only added fuel to the fire. And, Maza has been asking people to flag Crowder's videos. And he's also been communicating with YouTube. Now, at first, YouTube said that Crowder did not actually violate any of their rules. But of course, that was not good enough for Maza. He stayed persistent, and he was continuing to hammer YouTube and pleading with them to take him down. And, there was one part where YouTube had said that they told Crowder to take down the link to his t-shirt, the Socialism is for Figs t-shirt. But of course, that also was not good enough. Well, after all of his persisting and pushing and pleading, YouTube finally announced that Crowder is demonetized. Now, libertarians will always say that, YouTube is owned by Google. Google is a private company. And being a private company, if they want to make that decision, they can. Here's where I have a problem with this. And no, I'm not going to sit here and say that they're violating Steven Crowder's right to free speech, because Google does not have to give anyone the right to free speech, obviously. Here's where I have a problem with this. This was not Google policing themselves and saying, you know what, we're going to go through, we're going to find everything that we deem offensive, and we're going to either demonetize it or completely remove it. No, this is, in this case, an outside individual who is going to YouTube and rallying support. And, Maza is a part of Vox Media. Vox Media obviously has a lot of influence. Maza was also rallying individuals together and asking them to go through and, of course, do all the flagging. And I'm sure there were plenty of other people as well who were reaching out to YouTube and telling them the same thing as Maza. That's where I have a problem with this. You see, this was not YouTube policing themselves. This was someone with a lot of influence badgering YouTube until YouTube had no choice but to act. And that is why this whole thing now is being called the Vox Adpocalypse, because it's Vox Media. Here's another problem that I have with this. Crowder is not the only person who was affected by this. There are others who were affected by this, and these are not necessarily people who are making any kind of offensive content. No, these are independent content creators who had their stuff demonetized. They had videos deleted. Some of those videos you may never see again, which is bad, and I'm going to explain why. They were caught in the crossfire by this huge, massive sweep by YouTube, which they didn't do themselves. They did because someone badgered them until they did. YouTube caved. They gave in to mob rule. They bent the knee. And now this is what we have. So there are people who are complaining about being demonetized, and these are people who did nothing wrong. These are independent content creators, some of them journalists, some of them political commentators, who are now, there are people who do this for a living. There are people who create content, and this is their job. They are self-employed. They use this to support themselves. One of these people was a person named Ford Fisher, who has a channel on YouTube called News to Share. And all this is just a bunch of live video. Like, he has a bunch of live videos, and he is on scene at all these different events. Like, he's at anti-Trump rallies. He was at that march in Charlottesville. Last year, maybe the year before? I don't remember exactly when. It doesn't matter. But, he was demonetized. And for what? For showing live video? live video with absolutely no bias or agenda added to it. All he's doing is just going around and showing people, look, this is what's happening in the country. This is what's going on. I think you should know about it, so I'm showing it to you. He was demonetized. I'm sure he put in an appeal to get that reversed. I haven't heard anything. I haven't seen anything yet about if he won that appeal or not, or even if he submitted one. Hopefully he did, because he did nothing wrong. What I find really outrageous is that there is historical content that was flagged and that was removed. And, you know, a lot of that content pertains to stuff that happened during World War II, like Adolf Hitler speeches, other videos that show Nazi propaganda, which existed back in the 1930s and the 1940s. And this wasn't to spread Nazism. This wasn't because people supported Nazism. No, these are history buffs, some of them being history teachers. Well, they're history teachers. They teach history. And how do you think they teach history? Visual aids, duh. And in this case, it just happens to be Nazi propaganda videos. Actual Nazi propaganda videos because, well, one of the ways that the Third Reich came to power was by spreading propaganda. How they got an entire country behind the desire followed by the effort to try to exterminate an entire race was with propaganda. Funny how that works, right? Now, earlier in this episode, I said that on the 75th anniversary of Operation Overlord, we got hit with a heavy dose of irony. Here's part of that heavy dose of irony. This is from The Guardian on June 6th. YouTube has blocked some British history teachers from its service for uploading archived material related to Adolf Hitler, saying they are breaching new guidelines banning the promotion of hate speech. Apparently now actual history is hate speech. The video sharing website announced on Wednesday that it would remove material glorifying the Nazis from its platform in an attempt to stop people being radicalized. In the process, however, it also deleted videos uploaded to help educate future generations about the risk of fascism. Scott Alsop, who owns the long-running Mr. Alsop History Revision website and teaches at an international school in Romania, had his channel featuring hundreds of historical clips on topics ranging from the Norman Conquest to the Cold War deleted for breaching the rules that ban hate speech. Why would they delete stuff about the Cold War, and how is that even hate? Oh, wait a minute. I think I know why. Because, well, we've had the Cold War with the Soviet Union, and they were Russians. And, of course, Russians are obviously bad. So, if YouTube finds anything on their platform about Russians, well, if they delete all the videos, maybe the Russians will go away. Maybe we'll just forget about the Russians. You know, the same Russians who interfered in our election in 2016 and might do the same thing in 2020 because no one's doing anything about it. Yeah, those Russians. Yep. Okay. I think I know where YouTube is coming from on this. YouTube, you suck. It's absolutely vital that YouTube work to undo the damage caused by their indiscriminate implementation as soon as possible, said Alsop. Access to important material is being denied wholesale as many other channels are left branded as promoting hate when they do nothing of the sort. While previous generations of history students relied on teachers playing old documentaries recorded on VHS tapes on a classroom television, they now use YouTube to show raw footage of the Nazis and famous speeches by Hitler. The Google-owned service sent an automated email to Alsop saying his Clips channel had been removed for uploading content that promotes hatred or violence against members of a protected group. Are you kidding me? It's actual Nazi propaganda videos from... come on. No. This is ridiculous. Much of it consisted of clips from old BBC documentaries, which are no longer easily available, in addition to cinefilm of Hitler's speech the night he was appointed chancellor, and a short compilation of Joseph Goebbels talking about propaganda. Good grief. So these old footage that is hard to find now and probably no longer exist thanks to YouTube deleting it. Old footage, you know, this whole thing about radicalization and emboldening people and empowering people and turning people onto Nazism and reaching out to Nazi sympathizers. And this is getting completely stupid. This is getting incredibly stupid, to the fact that history teachers who are teaching history, which is a good tool to avoid committing mistakes that have already been made, such as why they do that D-Day commemoration in France every year on June 6th, because they want to avoid the atrocities committed during World War II. They don't want that to happen again, which is a big reason why we study history, because we don't want to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. Well, now all that stuff is racist, and it's hate speech, and it attacks targeted groups, and this is getting beyond stupid. Can we please stop? Can we please stop doing this? Because this is getting completely stupid now. The article continues. Richard Jones Nerzik, another British teacher affected by the crackdown, suggested YouTube's policy did not take into account the extent to which the history syllabus focused on the Second World War. Modern world study, and Hitler in particular, have dominated the history curriculum in the UK over the last 25 years, he said, explaining that he had been censured for uploading clips to his channel from old documentaries about the rise of Nazism. Some of his clips now carry warnings that users may find the material offensive, while others have been removed completely. He said he was appealing against YouTube's deletion of archived Nazi footage taken from mainstream media outlets, arguing that this was in itself a form of negationism or even Holocaust denial. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. We're so worried about Nazis and a second rise of Nazism that now we are going back and deleting actual footage of the original Nazis. Actual footage of Adolf Hitler and other Nazis in power who were spreading propaganda. Let's just delete the entire Holocaust while we're at it. I really hope Carlos Maza and all his minions are satisfied with what they've started. We're deleting actual history. People who have done nothing wrong are being punished. Meanwhile, what they've set out to do, get Steven Crowder removed from YouTube, has not happened. He's only been demonetized. But that is not really going to hurt Steven Crowder, because he has plenty of other revenue streams. He has his t-shirts. He has this thing called a mug club. And I'm not trying to promote anything Steven Crowder does here. I'm just saying things I'm just explaining why this is not really going to hurt him. This is beyond insane. This really needs to stop. The other part of that heavy dose of irony, World War II was fought to combat fascism and tyranny. Well, here we are witnessing fascism before our very eyes, where people are rallying together. These are not people in power, but these are people who are emboldened, even more emboldened now thanks to YouTube bending the knee. And we're watching fascism before our very eyes. They're trying to dismantle everything that they don't like. And yes, I understand that some of it is actual hate speech, but then there's all this other stuff that's going on. Taking down history, like deleting history? Why? And yes, I know Carlos Maza did not tell YouTube to actually take down history, but all of his pushing and persisting drove YouTube to everything that they've done to this point. And as the Guardian article said, some of this is BBC footage, which is difficult to find now. Now that YouTube has deleted it, it's probably gone forever. To all of these independent content creators who were affected by this, I really hope that all of you can win your appeals, if you have submitted appeals, to people who have had content removed. I hope that you can somehow get that content back. And to everyone who listened to this episode, I want to thank you as always for listening. And I would like to wish a pleasant weekend and a pleasant upcoming week to everyone except Carlos Maza and Vox Media. I'll be back with another episode again next week.
And thing sucks!